The Biden administration, it's now notified Congress that it is planning to move forward with more than $1 billion in weapons deals for Israel. It's important to note that this comes days after the White House had paused a single shipment of bombs last week. United States, it's shown increasing frustration with Israel's ground operations in Gaza, even threatening policy changes in case it goes ahead with the planned ground invasion of Rafah. It has, however, maintained its support of Israel. This back and forth, it's raised many questions by critics and observers. With the truce talks at an impasse, where will things go from here? My name is Hem Kaur Saroya, and to discuss this, we're now being joined by Professor David Dunn, Professor of International Politics, University of Birmingham. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, the Biden administration, as I mentioned, it plans to go ahead with more than $1 billion in weapons deals for Israel. This, of course, after it halted a previous shipment of bombs last week. How do you assess the United States policies at the moment?
I think what these various moves show is the very delicate line that the Biden administration is trying to take. On the one hand, they're saying that they won't supply those 2,000-pound bombs, which can be used to destroy civilian infrastructure and towns in Israel, because they are in some ways offensive weapons and are associated with the large number of civilian deaths in Gaza. On the other hand, they are not prepared to stop arms shipments entirely, because they also want to take the line that they recognize Israel's right to self-defense, and therefore they're happy to supply tactical vehicles and rounds for tanks and other sort of ammunition, which are part of that £1 billion package that is going to go to Congress this week. And it shows that actually they're wanting to try and restrain Israel on the one hand, and yet also not break with Israel totally on the other.
Absolutely, Sana. Just on that, there's been a lot of back and forth. We've seen growing signs of frustration, a growing divide between the two. However, it hasn't resulted in any significant changes on ground. What is your take on that?
Well, again, Biden is in a difficult position, because even though he made a modest move in stopping the shipment of 2,000-pound bombs, he had members of his own party on the right of his party. He had large numbers of congressional Republicans attacking him for his lack of support. He had criticism coming from Netanyahu in Israel for even a modest move, and therefore he senses the political difficulty of doing this. On the other hand, he's also frustrated that Israel seems to be planning to widen the war by sending troops into Rafah, and he's concerned that in doing so, that will make it more difficult to get even a temporary peace settlement, a ceasefire, in order to get the remaining hostages out, and it also potentially risks undermining the American attempts to actually get a post-conflict deal for Gaza, which is trying to negotiate with lots of Middle Eastern partners together. So the Biden administration is trying to actually advance all aspects of its policy at the same time, without having a radical change in its approach to Israel. Other critics, of course, have said, well, actually, he could do other things. He could, for example, go to Jerusalem and appeal over the heads of the Netanyahu government to the Knesset and to the Israeli people, and say that actually we demand a change in approach and a change in government in Israel. But Biden so far has been reluctant to do that.
Absolutely. You're right. This is going to be a difficult balancing act, to say the least. But that being said, there is growing frustration internationally as well. Protests have erupted across the globe. The Biden administration faces pressure. It's an election year, as well as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is facing increasing pressure from within Israel as well. That being said, how do you see things playing out going forward?
It's really difficult to see how things go in the direction that the Biden administration wants. The latest opinion poll coming out shows that Biden is well behind Mr. Trump in the key swing states. And a large part of that is in support among young people, Black Americans and Latino Americans, a large numbers of whom are unhappy about the way in which the Biden administration is supporting Israel in the way in which it's conducted the war in in Gaza. So many people saw that the move of stopping the 2,000-pound bombs as an indication that Biden was going to take a tougher approach to Israel in line with his electoral interests for fear of losing that young vote. And yet we have this latest announcement today indicating that actually he's going to send $1 billion worth of aid to Israel, and therefore that reluctance to support Israel is only very limited to offensive weapons and not defensive weapons. So it's difficult to see that the Biden administration can win on this score. And actually, what's likely to happen is that the Americans will continue to support Israel in various forms. However, America has also said that actually, if there was a full-scale invasion of Rafah, then America's support may fall off at that point. So it's trying to influence Israel at the margins rather than saying we're absolutely all for you or absolutely all against you. But it's not necessarily the case that America's having a great deal of success in that policy.
Right, you've pretty much summed it up, sir. But just for better understanding, there was hope when it came to the last round of peace talks. However, those are at a stalemate now. What do you think are the major reasons of contention now? And do you think lasting peace can be achieved anytime in the near future?
In terms of the lasting peace in the long term, that seems difficult to envisage. What Israel has done in terms of the way in which it's conducted the operations in Gaza and killing 34,000 civilians in that operation will stoke up resentment for the future. And it's difficult to see that there will not be further waves of terror coming from the Palestinian people in the future as a consequence of this latest round of hostilities. And in terms of actually how we get to an end of hostilities, again, it's not clear that that's very obvious. What Israel says is they want to eliminate entirely the Hamas leadership and operations and soldiers in the Gaza Strip. How they can do that without sending forces into Rafah and occupying the whole area is a challenge. And yet Israel doesn't want to actually end its conflict short of those measures. Hamas, of course, are showing no indication of their willingness to end things and no willingness to give their trump card, which are the hostages, back at any point, anytime soon. So this seems to be a protracted conflict, one that in the short term shows no immediate end to hostilities, and the long term is difficult to see how this resolves itself.
All right. Well, Professor Dunn, thank you so much for joining us on WION World as One with your insights on this.
Thank you.
For latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.